Welcome to Generation 3 of Pokemon Month. That's right, it's time for Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire. This was the third core game in the series, or third core pair of games in the series. It came out in 2003 in the United States, 2002 in Japan, and was the first Pokemon games for a new system. All the previous ones could be played on the original Game Boy, but the new games were played on this, the true sequel to the Game Boy Advanced, or Game Boy Advance, excuse me. It's a pretty neat piece of hardware, if I do say. I had some good times with this. This is when handheld games finally caught up with Super NES style technology. So, anyway, the Pokemon games on this system started off with Ruby and Sapphire. I myself chose Sapphire. I don't remember why. I think maybe it was Catch Kyogre, one of the legendary Pokemon, kind of an Orca sort of thing. I think that may have been it. I don't really remember. But this game was kind of where Pokemon started to take a little bit of downhill turn in popularity and general respect, I guess. I think part of it had to do with, some of its fan base growing up after a while, because this was 5 years after the games originally hit the United States. So, your 8 to 11-year-olds are now 13 to, it's too late to think, 13, 16 now, so they're a little bit older, not caring as much. Yu-Gi-Oh came in and kind of took some of the popularity away, and really this was like the third time that we had seen a lot of these things happen. So while they added a lot of new things in this game. For example, the graphics are much better. I mean, they're in color, they're for a new system, so that was cool, it can handle that. It added some more Pokemon, 135 new, which is the most new that they've ever added, for a grand total of 386 Pokemon at that point in time. So they added that. They added double battles. They added a whole new way of making each Pokemon you catch more unique by adding natures and abilities, which I'll get into that. But some of the same things in some ways we're starting to get old. You go around to the 8 gyms, you defeat that, you beat some sort of evil organization, you beat the Elite Four, you try to collect all the Pokemon. Okay, that's great. But then you go on and like, oh, who's this new Pokemon? It's basically a Rattata, or this is basically the new Pidgey, or ooh, another Butterfree Beedrill sort of deal. Oh, the electric Pokemon that I have to get. This is the new Pikachu. Some of that stuff got old. You kind of, one of the complaints about this set of games is that some of the Pokemon kind of looked like Pokemon that came from the past. For example, there was a new poison Pokemon that basically looked like, okay, that's Grimer, or a new lobster Pokemon. It's like, well, what about Kingler? I mean, they're basically the same thing, water Pokemon with high attack, though Crawdon did have a dark type. So some older stuff we're starting to, it was starting to wear out its welcome a little bit, just a little bit. It didn't, I believe actually this is the worst selling pair of games in the Pokemon franchise. It only sold 13 million copies. Oh my god. Combined, they're the top selling game on this system. So, even at its weakest, Pokemon still apparently was a big money maker. But the new and cool things about this game, besides the whole graphical update, one of the things that was most interesting to me was the natures. Each Pokemon has a nature, and that tweaks their base stats just a little bit. Say you had a bold nature or whatever, it would, I'm just giving an example, it would make your attack higher than normal and your defense lower than normal. So each Pokemon you catch is going to be different. For example, you caught 2 Mankeys. They have different natures, their stats are gonna progress in different ways, which is kind of interesting. It makes it more unique, and I just thought it was a cool thing to do. Sometimes it makes it harder to train things, but it gives it more variety, and variety is good. They also came with new abilities. For example, Gengar is now immune to ground attacks by its ability Levitate. I believe Gengar is. But anyway, that sort of thing. These are interesting. There was weather style effects. Kyogre made it rain. If if it rained, water attacks did more, thunder hit all the time, things like that. You could make it rain or shine with different Pokemon attacks as well. That was an interesting setup. They took away the day and night system, which a lot of people did not like, but actually these do keep track of time. The whole berry growing thing and other events, for example the ice cave, they keep track of time. So it may not be a day and night, but there still is a time clock system, and if you import Eevees, that is still a way to get Umbreons and Espeons. It's not widely known, but there is an internal clock in there, and yes, it does mess up after a while, so oops. Well, another thing I liked about Ruby and Sapphire was some of the more obscure types. They finally added some more examples of them. Like for a while there would be one or two instances of a dragon type, or dragon or ghost especially. There's like, okay, you had, for dragon you literally had Dragonite and Kingdra. That was it. For ghost you had Gengar and Mischievous. Great. So Ruby and Sapphire added a bunch of the niche types. For example, it was a lot easier to get a dragon Pokemon in this game. Not only was there the Dragonite style Salamence, which is a pretty damn cool Pokemon, but there were things like Flygon, a ground dragon, which was a lot easier to get, and it was good to have that sort of option. There was another dragon type, well, I'm forgetting the name of it right now. It's another flying dragon, but more of a bird type, and that was cool. There's also a couple. There was like 3 legendary dragons too. They had a lot of legendaries in this game. There were 2 new ghosts. There were 2 new ghosts, not just types, but like trees. You had, it's Dusclops at the time, and Bayonet. Yes, that's the name of Bayonet. Shuppet Bayonet. So that was cool there. They had a ton of new dark types. They had a Mighty Ina, which was almost a Rattata style, like really early in the game you could get it. They had Mighty Ina. They had Crawdaunt. There was 2 new part water dark types, which is kind of interesting. I'm forgetting some dark types at the moment, but you get the idea. They had more examples of the types that didn't really have a great offering in previous games. Some of the things that people didn't like as well. I know I'm kind of jumping back and forth. This is just kind of how my mind is working right now. You can only get 200. There were only 202 different Pokemon available in Ruby and Sapphire. So out of the 386 Pokemon, you can only collect 202, and that's, which made it easier to collect them all in the game. But a lot of people didn't like that. They're like, well, how am I going to get Poliwrath or Charizard or any of these things? Of course, Nintendo had that covered, but I'll get into that in another video. There was also a lot of water paths. This was a really watery map. There was a lot of water areas, paths to go on. There was a lot of surfing. There was a lot of fighting the same damn water Pokemon. There was like 2 new water HM abilities, which kind of got annoying. I mean, it was an interesting twist, but it lacked variety, which is the spice of life. So, what else about Ruby and Sapphire? They kind of pumped things up a bit with the evil organization in this one. They were trying to resurrect a legendary Pokemon and change the environment of the area, Hoenn, which is kind of big plans as opposed to just stealing Pokemon, trying to change the face of the earth. And depending on which game you had, is a different bad guy organization. This one, it was Team Aqua. They were trying to submerge the land, and the other one, it was Team Magma. They were trying to get rid of the ocean. So, in mind, Team Aqua was the bad guys. What else about Ruby and Sapphire? Double battles were finally added for the first time, which was kind of cool. I like the idea of 2-on-2 fighting. They didn't really focus on it. It's one of those things where they introduce, but then they get a bit better at it in other times. And I will explain to you how 2-on-2 battles work and some strategies. They also added Pokemon contests, which was a different way to play. You didn't have to do it, but it was an interesting. It was something new in the Pokemon franchise. I never really got into it, but it definitely made the game bigger. It was more you could do in a game, which is never a bad thing. Just ask Grand Theft Auto, right? I'll talk to you about that in another video as well. So, Ruby and Sapphire. They're not looked upon as the greatest additions of the Pokemon franchise, but they were an important stepping stone to get to where we are today. And I guess it was the low point that Nintendo survived, so If you liked Ruby and Sapphire and you played it, you are a true fan of Pokemon. And guess what? I played it, bitches. I'll see you next time.